Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. I'm Courtland with CuteLikeUEmbroidery, and today I'm going to be showing you how to use our hair applique designs. Before we get into the video though, be sure to subscribe. We have a lot of cute in the hoop projects coming soon that I think you're really going to like. So these designs were created to be a universal DIY tool that you could use across all of your favorite projects, all of your favorite in the hoop dolls from different designers, busy books, stuffies, felt dolls, really anything that you need to add a hairstyle to, now you can. The way we use these files is applique. So with each step of our doll, we are adding a step of our hair. So we're not creating the hair all at once and then adding it to our doll later. We're adding the hair to our doll as we go. So when our doll is finished, so is our hair. So I'm going to be showing you each step of the way how to do this. I'm going to walk you through our pigtails and our back hairlines and how to use our back hairlines if your doll or whatever you're adding this to doesn't come with a back of head file. And I will also walk you through how to use our front hairlines and bangs and the difference between those. But first, let's talk about fabric. Felt and fleece work great, and the bonus is they're economical, so not very expensive compared to fur. And also, it can be a bit better for younger children to play with than the fur. And you know, maybe you're just not confident enough to work with fur or you hate the mess. This is a really good alternative. So you're going to want felt or fleece or some kind of fabric of that nature for your hair. If your doll pattern calls for stretch, I'm going to be making a doll from Planet Applique today, so that does call for stretch. If your doll calls for stretch, you're going to want to use a fabric that also has stretch in it, so you keep that integrity of the head shape so that when you stuff it, it fills out nice and round and doesn't have any sort of flat spots that using felt would per se in this situation, in this doll that I'm going to be making. So you're going to want something with stretch. So fleece is perfect for that. And you're just going to want to make sure that your direction of stretch goes the same way as your doll pattern calls for. So this is typically side to side as opposed to up and down. Do you see how this stretches a bit more? And if you've made a few dolls, you probably know all about stretch, but I just wanted to throw that in there, that it is much better to use a fabric that has stretch if your doll also has stretch. So the first step that we're going to start with is our pigtails. And the reason that we want to do this first is so that we don't forget them later, because it's very easy to do. You know, it's very fun. I think stitching the face is the funnest part, right? And so sometimes we're kind of eager to get to that part, but if we don't have our pigtails before we get there, then we can't sandwich them, and that's going to be a problem. So just stitch your pigtails first, that way you don't forget them. If your doll has, you know, ears or something, other little things that you need to stitch, you can sort of play hoop Tetris and kind of stitch all those things together and save some time that way. But we are going to stitch our pigtails first. The direction of stretch for your fabric really doesn't matter for pigtails. It will matter for your back hairline and front hairline, but pigtails not so much, so you don't really need to worry about that. Now, all of our files come with die lines, and they are only there to help you with fabric placement. So if you know that your fabric covers the area that you'll be stitching, you don't need to stitch the die lines. I personally like to skip die lines, but they are there if you need them, you know, to place your fabric down. I will say though that with your pigtails, if you stitch the die line, use the same color of thread that you're going to be using to stitch your hair, because those die line stitches could show up on the back of your pigtails. So if you stitch your die line with red thread and then you stitch your hair with brown thread, you might see that red thread on the back, and that wouldn't look very nice. So stitch your die line, your pigtail die lines at least, with the same color thread so that doesn't happen. So you will layer 2 pieces of your hair fabric and then stitch out your pigtails. And the steps are separated by color. We did this so that if you wanted to stitch your details in a different color than you stitched the perimeter of your hair, you could do that and sort of, you know, simulate like highlights or something like that. So that's why those are separated. When you're done stitching your pigtails, you'll take your fabric out of your hoop and remove your stabilizer and then cut around the edge of those stitches, and then they're ready to be sandwiched, so you can set those aside. Our next step is our back hairline. There are 2 ways to do this. The first way, if your pattern comes with a back of head file, and the other way if your project is finished by just placing a piece of fabric over the area at the end. If it's enclosed that way, we have a trick for that too. But if your doll comes with a back of head file, you'll load that, you will load your hairline, and then you will place your hairline so that the edges of your hairline meet the edges of your head, and so that the hairline is about an inch or an inch and a half above where your head ends or neck begins. If your doll does not come with a back of head file, that's okay. So what you're going to do is load your face file, okay? And you're gonna use that as your guide. You're gonna pretend your face isn't there, but you're gonna use that shape of the head as your guide to place your hairline. And you can either then delete your face before you go to stitch out, or just advance past it in stitch out. And you're going to want to lay a piece of fabric down that will be big enough to cover your head later and stitch around, and then lay that piece of hair fabric down too. When you're lining up your back hairline, the die line has a center line to sort of help you position everything. So if you're going to skip the die line, make sure that you advance past this before you lay down your hair fabric. Otherwise, if it stitches on top of your hair fabric, you're going to see that center line. So if you are skipping die lines, make sure you advance past that. When you're done stitching your back hairline and any details it may have had, you're going to trim along that bottom edge of your fabric, and then you're going to set that aside with your pigtails. I'll just mention quickly here that the reason I do not have the circles for doll joints is because I'm creating a sewn-in head. So you'll see that I have a neck and I don't have those circles. If you're wondering, that's what's going on there. But again, it doesn't affect what we're doing at all. The steps are all still going to be the same. So now we're going to do our front hairline or our bangs. And the only difference between these is that bangs have a little bit more detail. If your machine can handle a lot of bulk, you could do something like I've done here, where for my bangs, I had my piece of fabric under here, but then I added another piece on top of it, and I stitched around that to give that a little bit more dimension. But no problem, it's still gonna look great even if your machine can't handle that extra bulk. On that note, let me give you a tip about bulk. A lot of times with our one needle machines, sometimes we have to help guide the fabric through. And I really like to use these tweezers that come with a lot of machines to help you thread them, right? And so I like to use the bottoms of these kind of help guide my fabric through so that I'm not sticking my finger anywhere near my needle, because that could get really scary really fast. So I kind of use these as an extension of my fingers and help guide everything through. So if ever your machine in any project has a problem with bulk, you can use that and that'll help you. So you're ready to stitch your hairline or your bangs. So you've loaded your face file, and then you have your hairline or bangs. And again, you'll just make sure that the edges of those line up with the edges of the head. The bangs have this yellow line that you'll see. Your hairline will just go all the way across. You have everything loaded, you have everything lined up. Now, when you're looking at your screen, make sure that your hairline or your bangs, they don't cover your eyes for sure, or your eyebrows, or any accessories you're gonna stitch, like your glasses or anything like that. I like to line my hairline up right where my ears are gonna be. So that's a good spot. When you have everything lined up, go to stitch out. Now the doll I'm making calls for lining. So I have a piece of fleece lining and then my doll skin fabric. And then I like to stitch my face first, but you can do this in any order. Whatever order you choose though, you are going to need to advance to your hairline before you finish the doll. So the last couple of steps, when you're adding that back piece to your face to enclose everything, you're going to want to skip those steps and go to your hairline first. And then we'll go back to those last couple steps when we're done and sandwich everything together and get it all sewn together. After I've stitched my face, I lay down my piece of hair fabric, just one layer here. Or like I said, if you want to try and do that dimension with the bangs and your machine can handle bulk, you can do it that way too. So now you have your pigtails, your back hairline, and your front hairline. We are going to put everything together and sew it up. Before we do this though, you want to make sure that your back hairline and your front hairline are trimmed along the edges. Otherwise, you will get your hair fabric in your seam like this, and that doesn't look very good. So make sure you trim everything first. Now we're gonna sandwich everything together. Secure everything in place with tape. I like to make sure that I'm not gonna be stitching over a lot of tape because this makes your needle sticky, and that's not good for your machine or your project. So I just like to make sure that I'm not stitching over a lot of tape. So you'll see I use little pieces, but I still make sure that everything is securely in place. You want to place your pigtails bobbin side up so that when our head is done and we turn it right side out, the bobbin faces the back side. You can play around with placement of your pigtails. I like to use my eyes as a guide. You can also leave some of the tab out, and you can add bows or hair ties to that when you're finished, or you can go right up to the edge, which is what I'm doing here. You want to fold over any parts of your pigtail that might get caught in that final stitch around, because we don't want them to get stitched into that. So fold them over, place a piece of tape over them. If your doll has ears or anything like that, don't forget to add that. Now we're going to take our back of head piece and we're going to lay it over our face. I like to make sure that my hair, the top of the back hairline, is touching the edge of the bottom of the front hairline so that it's all kind of seamless. It kind of goes around the head seamlessly. And you know, if you lined your stuff up where it was above the ears, this will kind of do it by itself. But if you needed to move your hairline up a little so that you would miss your glasses or whatever, yeah, just make sure that those kind of line up. And then tape around your piece, make sure it's secure, and then you're ready to go back to those that last step or last few steps depending on the doll you're making, and do the final circle around. And then you're ready to trim around your head and turn your doll inside out. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I will link our Facebook group in the description below, so if you have any additional questions or you want to share a picture of your make, you can go do it over there. Be sure to subscribe. I'm really excited about what we have coming out. And yeah, until next time guys, keep it cute.